Dad's home today. Youth Commissioner.
Boarding at the same time.
I don't think so. We're going to let them sit.
Are we ready? Oh, the microphone's hot now. All right, watch what I say. We're going to welcome everyone to the October 2nd, is it October 2nd? Yes, meeting of the Parks, Recreation, and Intergenerational Services Commission. Tonight's agenda is available on the counter in the back over there, along with request to speak cards. So if you haven't turned in one of those and you want to speak on any of the items, make sure you have that done before the staff presentation on that item. So please note that tonight's meeting is being recorded and televised, so all speakers make sure, we'll let you know if your microphone's not on or if you're not speaking into it. We are going to, speaking may cause some individuals to be uncomfortable, so everyone's asked to be professional and respectful at all times. We are going to limit comments to 3 minutes. I don't think we've ever used the actual timer, but if you start going over, I'll just kind of go, hey, can you wrap it up? So we'll keep it straight. That's that for that. So the Pledge of Allegiance. We will all stand, and I'm going to say Commissioner Hargrove is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance today.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Commissioner Hargrove. Roll call.
Chair Price,
I am here.
Vice Chair Mungia Esquivel,
Here.
Commissioner Hargrove,
Present.
Commissioner Sandoval,
Here.
Commissioner Ahmad,
Here.
Commissioner Clayton. Here. Youth Commissioner Early, absent. Alternate Commissioner Horwitz.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you. So just a reminder, if anyone wishes to speak, they should fill out one of those cards. I think we got everybody here, so we're going to go on to item 1A, presentation by the public not on, or for matters not on the agenda within the jurisdiction of the commission. The commission is prohibited by law from discussing issues brought to them at this time. We have no 1A cards, correct? Just making sure. Okay. Item 1B, commission communications. Anything for commission communications?
No communications. Sorry.
All right, on to item 2, the City of West Sacramento Tree Program and Partnership with Tree Davis presentation. So we have Michelle and I think Chris, right?
Correct.
Thanks, Chris.
Good evening, Commission. As you know, my name's Chris Sorosky. I work for the Parks and Rec Department. I'm the newly appointed tree administrator for the Parks Department, and I'd like to introduce Michelle Blair Menderos. She's works for Tree Davis for Trees for Tomorrow, and we're just here to give you a little information about the current program we have in the Parks Department, trees. So Michelle.
Thanks, Chris. Is this good? Yeah, perfect. Thank you. Hi, Elizabeth. So the Trees for Tomorrow program, I actually work for Tree Davis, and we have a large cap and trade grant with the city of West Sacramento. Tree Davis is the grantee on that. And our goal is to plant 1,000 trees in the city of West Sacramento, by December of 2019. the trees that we plant are only north of the barge canal. So the way we got this grant is through a tool called CalEnviroscreen through CAL FIRE and California Climate Investments. And we are only allowed to plant trees north of the barge canal because of the air quality. So we plant trees in the city of West Sacramento, and I work for a nonprofit called Tree Davis, and we work throughout Yolo County. Is there more I should say about this? I'm sure there's like questions, so.
How does someone get a tree?
How does somebody get a tree? Thank you. Questions are helpful. How does someone get a tree? So if people are interested in getting a tree and they live north of the barge canal, they can reach out to us by email or phone or call Chris, and Chris will forward that along to me. And we ask folks to attend a workshop. And the reason we ask them to attend a workshop is because education for this is really important, and we want to make sure that trees are being planted correctly, because we want them to live for at least 40 years to sequester carbon and reduce greenhouse gas emissions. So thank you for the question.
So
currently, we have planted, we've planted over, this is a good number, we planted over 650 trees. We've made some improvements over the past few months, and we need to plant 1,000 by December of 2019. And the thing is we can't plant, we're not able to plant these trees throughout the whole city, because we get a lot of people from south of the barge canal that call us and they want a tree, and unfortunately I'm not able to give them one because they don't qualify. So
how many trees can you get?
as many as you want. And you don't, as many as you want, and we give trees to businesses, homes, so private property and public property is included in this grant. We can plant trees anywhere.
Okay, the 650 is towards the total of 1,000 already?
That's correct.
Question. Hi.
Sure.
And you have listed schools on here, and I know from having known people through Davis that there was some partnership maybe with Washington Unified.
Yeah.
So which schools, and is it the same thing? It has to be north of the barge canal?
Yes, we do have to be north of the barge canal. We actually do a lot of work in the schools. Tree Davis, the Trees for Tomorrow program in particular, has partnered with the Yolo County Office of Education. We work with the Career and College Readiness Specialist there, and we actually developed a Career and College Readiness internship program for students that attend Washington Middle College High School, which is the charter school located north of the barge canal. And we brought those students, they planted trees at their school, and then we brought them to Westfield Village Elementary School as well as Riverbank Elementary School, and they presented to younger kids about the benefits of trees and urban forestry and why trees are important, and we also planted trees at both of those schools.
My next question then, my daughter goes to Westfield, and it's got like that huge park next to it. The trees are on campus, you're saying? Okay, because I only knew about the trees that were at the park that we planted last year during Arbor Day.
Yeah.
Which were the trees that you're talking about at Westfield School?
We actually, so, you know where that fence is?
Yeah.
That divides the school? There's 5 or 6 new trees that are right along that fence on school
on school
property.
property,
And we
okay.
also planted trees on that park as well.
And can they be fruit trees, or are these just shade trees?
Well, because this grant is, the purpose of this grant is to sequester carbon and reduce greenhouse gas. So a lot of what we focus on is planting larger shade trees because they sequester more carbon. We did get permission from CAL FIRE to switch out some of the trees that were in our original grant agreement. And we gave away 120 fruit trees last spring. And unfortunately, we can't give away more fruit trees because fruit trees just don't sequester enough carbon.
I got it.
So it's the number of trees that matters, but just as importantly, it's the amount of carbon that we sequester at the end of,
Right.
December of 2019.
And, sorry, one more question I have.
Sure.
I know that the library hosts your meetings at the kind of the Caring for Tree, that's how you earn your tree. Have there ever been talks of having those meetings at a school site?
There has been. Are you saying to,
So like, for instance, use like a school's cafeteria and make it like an after-school thing where parents can come and do the same thing you did at the library, but it would be at one of the school sites?
that's an awesome idea. we haven't done that. We haven't done that,
Okay.
but it's a great idea.
Yeah,
And
I'm on the PTO, so if there's anything like parents could do, it would be great to like learn more about this so we can, and I live, on this side of town, so, yeah, I would love to learn more about that so I can help too.
Absolutely, and it's collaboration and partners where people let us into those spaces that helps the program grow. So if we can collaborate in that way, I'd be
Great.
totally appreciative of that.
Yeah, thank you.
Hi, so I appreciate you sharing some of this information with a couple of the members of the public at, what was it, Jackrabbit Brewery, Yellow Brewery?
Yeah.
With Peggy, so that was a nice turnout, and it seems to be that there's a great interest in trying to get trees. Can you just share a little bit more about what the process looks like from when you apply to get a tree, the workshop you attend, to actually receiving it?
Yeah, it's interesting because what we've done recently is, we've done a lot of outreach and putting the word out to the community about the trees that we have to offer. And it's interesting because people reach out and they want a tree, and there's interest, and they qualify. However, given the stipulations of our grant agreement, we do need to provide the community with education on how to plant that tree to make sure it survives. And a lot of times what I find, and I don't know if you find the same thing, people say that they want to come, they want to come to the workshop, and we'll have 10 to 15 people signed up for the workshop at the community center, and people just don't show. And we've tried to really be accommodating with the times. They're in the evening, where when people are get out of work, they can come and learn about trees, and it only takes an hour, it's not too much time. And then we actually have the tree and the stake delivered to their home, and hopefully this fall mulch as well, because mulch is important. But it's challenging to get people out to those workshops, and when people aren't able to come, we try to work with them and provide that information electronically, digitally. But I personally think, in terms of community engagement, having that interaction and being able to provide people with that educational opportunity is important in terms of maintaining tree survival in the long term. I don't know if that answered your question.
Yeah, it does.
But it's hard to get people to show up. And a lot of folks that do show up, sometimes they have a dead tree, or they need to have a tree removed before they're able to plant another one. And, money sometimes is challenging in that regard.
There's a requirement to have it be an in-person workshop versus being able to do one online.
There's not a requirement, but we also think about access. If a lot of, some of the people that we deal with are older, and they might, navigating an online, virtual workshop is sometimes challenging, but that's definitely something we can do. We have video resources. That's what I send people who can't come to watch and learn how to plant the tree. It's not the most interesting thing, but it's sort of like when you need to fix something, and you're not really interested unless you're going to watch YouTube to do that, if that makes sense.
So the other thing that the workshop does, it helps guide the people to choose the tree that fits their yard.
I have a question, sorry, for Chris. I remember hearing about an ordinance, and I could be wrong, a couple years ago. Again, this could be totally false, but that if there's a shade tree in your front yard and you cut it down, you have to replace it. Is that true?
Spray out oak tree.
Has to be oak tree, is that what it is?
Well, there's a couple. There's, if the tree is within 12 and a half feet back a curve, it requires a tree permit. If it's a native oak that's 50 inches in circumference at chest height, you'll need a tree permit to remove, plus an arborist report.
Okay.
If it's a heritage tree, you're allowed up to 75-inch circumference at chest height, but
Okay.
that would require a permit. So any of those protected trees, if you're pruning on any branches that are more than 5 inches in diameter, we ask for a permit.
I see.
If an arborist tells you that the tree is unsafe and poor condition, we allow you to remove it, and we recommend that you find a tree to replant.
What Michelle said about many people having being deterred by costs of removing a tree, living so close to here, that's, many of my neighbors, their trees suffered from the drought. They're just dried up or whatever, and they haven't removed them, or they're just kind of half chopped them or whatever. But we've lost a lot of shade in our neighborhood as a result. Does the city offer any kind of like arborist services, subsidize anything, any kind of guidance about how to seek out tree services at a lower cost for those residents?
Right now, the only resources we have are for seniors. I've put together a list of senior resources, and I'm still not sure who on that list will help out. We haven't figured that out, but I have provided a list for people to start calling.
Where is that list online, or?
It's not.
Okay.
I could email it to you.
Yeah, that'd be great, because we have a lot of senior folks
Okay.
that live in my area. Thank you.
And I received that from the senior center across the
Oh,
street.
okay.
so.
Sure. Hi, guys. Thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate what you're doing, and I think it's just a great resource that you're making available, and it's so exciting that it doesn't cost anybody anything. So you were talking about some of the trouble you've had getting people to attend your events. I'm wondering about any opportunities you've taken to go to where people already are gathering, things like maybe football games at the high school or farmers markets, and then running workshops there. Is there any reason you wouldn't be able to do something like that?
And historically, we've been to farmers markets and stuff like that. One of the challenging things about going to a football game at the high school is reaching folks that are in the target area. When we've taken the time to actually go out and table, which we have in the past, when we calculate the percentages of what it takes us in terms of our staff time, because there is limited funding for this, we're not reaching the people that actually qualify for the trees. There was one event we went to, and we had about 40 people sign up, and actually only 3 of them were in the target area. So it's challenging. I mean, Tree Davis, we're a small nonprofit located in Davis. I work about 30 hours a week on this project. Our executive director is part-time. It's limited resources, but we've definitely tried that, and we'll continue to in terms of outreach.
Any other questions?
No, my comment. Thank you so much, Michelle. It was-
For sure. Thanks.
Sorry.
Sorry, one
And
more.
I think I just want to reiterate what she mentioned is, I think if we know of any spaces or any events, I think it'd be a great idea for us to reach out to Michelle and invite her to come and talk to some of the neighbors and offer this service. And I think, what you did at that event was great, and you had a targeted population that you spoke to, and I think that we can do what we can to invite her to be in front of people that'd be interested.
All right. That's it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, consent agenda. Item 3 is approval of the minutes of the August 7th regular meeting.
Motion to approve.
Second?
So the motion was made by Commissioner Esquivel, seconded by Commissioner Clayton.
Wait, I want to clarify something.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Is the Willie DePrado Park part of the consent agenda? We're not going to discuss that?
We can take it off if you
You
want.
can ask that it be, you can ask the chair that it be removed for comment, but then it would be voted on through the
I-
consent, or you
I'd
can vote on
request-
it separately.
I would request that we remove that part from the consent agenda so we can talk about it. I think there's a lot of people on this commission and in this room who don't know who Willie DePrado is, and this is the only committee it's going through. So I'd like to pull it so we can appropriately honor him.
Commissioner Hargrove, I'd just like to let you know that it is going to city council.
We're the only commission. That's a council.
That's correct.
Yes.
That's correct.
So
I-
for those reasons, I'd like, it's for positive reasons, but it's because I would like to
I don't know
talk about
the
it.
policy direction I need to do to remove that from the
So
consent agenda.
you would just hold it off, then
Okay.
you would ask for a motion on the remainder of the consent agenda, which
Okay.
is the minutes, and then you will hear that item.
Okay, let's do that. So we have a motion to,
Wait a minute. You're going to have to, we're doing the minutes, so let's finish that.
yeah,
and then
that's,
we can get to
but we
his.
have to remove it from the consent agenda first, and then we're making a motion on the consent agenda, which includes now just the minutes.
Correct. You don't have to make a motion to remove the
Yes.
item. You can just remove the item. So the motion on the floor is for the consent agenda, absent item number 4. That's the motion on the floor.
Yes,
So moved.
already moved and seconded. So, are there any comments on the minutes? I didn't hear any. All in favor of approving the consent agenda for the minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, the consent agenda for item 3, the minutes, is passed. Now on to item 4, removed from the consent agenda, consideration and recommendation for the naming of Circle Park to Willie DePrado Park. So you get
Thank
to
you.
tell us about that.
Sure. Chair Price, members of the commission, Cindy Tuttle, Director of Parks and Recreation. There is a facility naming policy that the city has, which states that any individual can nominate another individual or organization for the naming of facilities. The naming of facilities is vested in the city council. However, the policy does require that the Parks Commission make a recommendation to the city council regarding the naming of park facilities. At a council meeting, at a previous council meeting, Councilmember Christopher Ledesma and Mayor Cabalden requested specifically that this commission consider renaming Circle Park, Circle Park to William Willie DePrado Park. As stated in the staff report, Mr. DePrado has been in West Sacramento for well over 60 years. He was the owner of Willie's Market on 15th Street, for those of you that can remember Willie's Market. That's like my gray hair. I think we all have been in there more than once or twice. It was really actually a place where a lot of people gathered to get information. It was like, you know, because before we had the internet and fancy phones and stuff, people actually gathered and they would go to DePrado Market and get all what's going on in the community from Willie DePrado. He was very active. We're going to hear an item later today about Memorial Park and Little League, the Little League Park, and he was extremely instrumental in the development and bringing of that of West Sacramento Little League and that park here. And so we just think it would be very fitting to have a park which is right around the corner from where Willie's Market is. But I talked to Steve DePrado just today, and he was telling me, well, you know, our house was right there as well. So we just think for a lot of reasons that it's very fitting to name this park after Mr. DePrado. As you may know, it has been kind of an unwritten policy that most facilities and park facilities are named for deceased members. However, the city council a few years back thought that it would be nice that if there were certain individuals who had contributed significantly to this community, that we do consider naming a facility after that individual. Some examples are, of course, the Mike McGowan Bridge. And this would be of a similar nature. So we request that you make a recommendation to the city council on whether or not to rename Circle Park to Willie DePrado Park, and I am happy to answer any questions.
And I'd like to make the motion that it be moved. I didn't know who brought this forward or why it was brought forward, but I absolutely agree with it. I'm old enough to have shopping is not the right word, but hanging out at Willie's and buying candy there, and they used to make sandwiches in the back, and it was always a very friendly, nice place to be. I grew up in the Westmore Oaks area, and that was the store that you would ride your bike down to and hang out. I was too young at the time to really appreciate who the owner was or what he meant for the community, but as I've grown through the years and have become more active myself, I understand that, the Prado family as a whole have done a lot for West Sacramento, but Willie especially really has, and there's a lot of people who respect him. On the policy issue, I think it's great that the city of West Sacramento is starting to recognize people before they're deceased. It doesn't do a lot of good to recognize someone when they're not around to appreciate it a little bit, or for people to be able to share in that. So I think that that's a great little policy change. And I'm really great. I think it's really great that the city's considering doing this, and I'd like to make the motion that we do it. We approve this and recommend to the city council that they name Circle Park DePrado Park.
Second it.
All right, motion from Commissioner Hargrove, seconded by Commissioner Clayton. Any more discussion on this? I was going to say, for those watching on TV or in the audience who don't know where this park is, or where Willie's Market was, Willie's Market is now the Results Training Gym. So 15th Street off Jefferson behind the Arco over that way, just trying to orient everybody. I was not in town when Willie's Market was open, but I do remember hearing stories about it, and I actually read a bunch on him today, so I feel like I learned a lot. So hopefully, I think the point of a lot of this, the naming facilities, is to provide a basis of history for people. So like you say, okay, who is Sam Combs? And you might go look it up and spend a little bit of time trying to learn about people who were instrumental in the way the city's progressed. So I agree with Commissioner Hargrove, is that it's nice that we have the ability to do that for a living resident. So I agree with that. So all in favor of the motion to rename Circle Park into William Willie DePrado Park, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries for item 4, which was removed from the consent agenda. Make sure I say all the right words. All right, regular agenda. Item 5, workshop on the Parks and Open Space Master Plan Update, Capital Improvement Plan Funding Strategies. Tracy.
Good evening, Commission. Tracy Michael, Business Manager for the Parks and Rec Department. This item is a workshop on the Parks and Open Space Master Plan Update effort. I am joined this evening by Michael Svets with PRIS Consulting, the firm that has been helping us to work on the update effort. And the last time we had a workshop with this commission, our focus was on level of service analysis. We reviewed park classifications and how the city was performing in terms of hitting some of our acreage targets in those park classifications per our General Plan 2035 targets. And so now this evening we're shifting gears a little bit, and we're starting to look at funding resources and strategies and some initial findings related to funding policy considerations. So I'm going to turn it over to Michael Svets to walk through those.
Need this. Thank you, folks. Appreciate the opportunity. As Tracy indicated, kind of moved into almost the third of 3 phases associated with this project, and it's really the capital improvement component. As we have started to frame that out, and I'll share with you how we're framing that out, you know, the key is to make sure that you can actually implement what the capital improvement program is stating. And so, obviously, a key component of doing that is the funding strategies associated with that. So there will be a quick review just to make sure we're kind of all on the same page in terms of how this is all evolving. But the meat and potatoes of this is really going to be around the capital improvement program and the funding strategies associated with it. Okay, so just as a quick reminder, we have gone through the community needs assessment and have identified the prioritized needs for programs and services, as well as facilities and amenities. One thing that when we took this information to City Council, they had asked us to go back and do some cross-tabulation by age. And so we turned around and provided information back to Council, which you're obviously privy to, that really takes a look at the programs and services and the facilities and amenities to say, how did, families with kids 0 to 10 prioritize program services, facilities, amenities? How did families with children 10 to 19? How did young adults prioritize it? And how did seniors prioritize it? And of course, there are some differences, but for the most part, the way the community had prioritized its programs and services, as well as park facilities and amenity needs, were very much in line. The levels of service standards, we spent a lot of time last time talking about this. And just as a reminder, this is kind of where we were at on the park acreage side of the equation. One quick update. Since we presented to you, there has been a change, obviously, in terms of population information. And so we're actually able to dial this in instead of using 2017 as the baseline, and then the projections for 2022, 2027, we're able to utilize 2018 data as well as then 2023 and 2028 population projections. So the numbers are a little bit different, but it still tells the same story in the sense that your greatest amount of needs are the backbone of park and recreation suburban systems, which is in the neighborhood park and the community park categories. From an amenities perspective, still in the same general areas where athletic fields are most needed, tennis courts are needed, as well as then, some reservable picnic shelters. When we look at indoor facilities, just as a reminder, you're pretty well set based on the square footage of your facilities as they exist today, and also kind of looking forward. We also kind of did the analysis that said, okay, if you have these needs in park acreage, what do you have on the books that you already have identified in terms of park acreage that is undeveloped? And how does the development of these park acres that you already have impact those needs? And so as we look forward, we are, not to say that you're able to implement every one of those undeveloped park acreages, but you really solve a lot of those needs in a lot of those park classification categories. Again, still looking at needs primarily in the neighborhood park category. So we wanted to come back also and talk to you about those emerging issues. We kind of presented these to you over the winter of 2017, 2018, and to revisit these because these are still relatively the buckets around which we are looking to make recommendations. Not to say that there won't be other opportunities as the plan evolves, but just wanted to revisit these for you. So one of them was economic development through park development. We recognize that there is, in many cases, sometimes a disconnect between how parks impact the economic development and the growth of the community. And so we're really looking at, through the capital improvement program, of trying to prioritize improvements that tie back to economic development. And this is, of course, the Central Park concept, which has been shared with you all, as well as the waterfront development area. And so the three target areas, Washington Neighborhood, the Bridge District, and Stonelock Pioneer Bluff. And you can see that there are a number of different opportunities there. Washington Neighborhood is primarily neighborhood parks and trails. The Bridge District is much more of a urban type of environment, park system, where you're having plazas and then almost like mini pocket parks, so to speak, where you have distributed elements, throughout that area. So one element could be a really cool playground. Another element could be an outdoor fitness area. Another element could be a skate park, and so on and so forth. They almost stand alone as special use and or kind of mini pocket parks. And then, of course, the Stonelock Pioneer Bluff, in addition to kind of that whole Central Park concept, there is opportunities for trail development that will work its way in and out of private property potentially, but it also has the ability to further develop and support private development, which in turn ties to economic development. The Recreation Center business plan, this is really about making sure we understand we're trying to manage expectations with regards to the Recreation Center and to identify what is the appropriate business model in which it should operate. I think that it's just kind of been all over the place. A lot of language has been thrown out regarding cost recovery and how the Recreation Center should support itself. And we're trying to manage those expectations based on the facility in and of itself, and also look at where there are opportunities to potentially renovate that facility. So I'll just give you an example of what that looks like. If you've been to the recreation center lately or have not been to the recreation center lately, there is a small combined fitness center that has both cardio equipment as well as resistance training in a small free weight area. For a community of that size, that area is actually relatively small. There's a lot of equipment crammed into a really small area that has a low ceiling, has some lighting, doesn't have a whole lot of exterior lighting to it. And yet at the same time, there is other unproductive space adjacent to it that is not being maximized. An opportunity to capitalize on what the community has said is one of their highest and greatest needs is fitness and wellness programs and services, is maybe there's an opportunity within that recreation center to expand that fitness center into some of the adjacent unproductive spaces, thereby potentially allowing you to grow your membership base. So we're going to look at updating that membership model, what's included as part of that, what's not included as part of that, how is there opportunity to generate additional revenue. There is potentially space on the pool deck that can serve as party space. Some space has been included, has been created kind of out of thin air with, some canopies and some umbrellas and tables and chairs and some roping and stanchion, another area there to host other birthday parties. Update the facility, as I kind of mentioned. Try to enhance that staffing model. The operations has gone through, obviously, as many agencies or departments, divisions within the city have gone through some downsizing. And one of those key areas is part-time staff. Part-time staff is paramount to the success of a recreation center, so trying to understand where those enhancements need to be. And then to make sure that we recognize what the core functions of that facility needs to be. That facility was constructed before the community center was constructed. There is some duplication of services and programs between those two facilities, just simply based on how the recreation center was constructed and the outcomes that it had in mind versus, now what it potentially can and should be now that the community center has been online for a number of years. So to make sure that we're, in essence, not competing with ourselves between the community center and the recreation center. One other, let me make sure I didn't skip one. One other emerging issue is obviously continued partnerships with Washington Unified School District. These partnerships obviously provide opportunities for efficiency and maximization of taxpayer dollars. School districts are primarily funded through taxpayer dollars, as well as city parks and recreation departments. If there's opportunities to leverage those taxpayer dollars, we want to do that. It also gives us the ability to potentially leverage funding sources for grants. If there is opportunities for grants in which seed money is needed, there is opportunities for the city and the school district to contribute to that seed money necessary to apply for a grant. Expanding parks without land acquisition costs, and then, of course, one of the two big needs in the community is athletic fields and neighborhood parks, potentially, as we had talked about last time, at Westmore Oaks and the charter school site. However, we need to recognize that parks and the city of West Sacramento cannot advance these initiatives without understanding what the long-term plans are for those facilities and those sites, the school district's long-term plans. And so there has to be continued dialogue going forward to make sure that that happens efficiently, effectively, and make sure everybody's kind of singing from the same sheet of music. Trails, trails, trails. Obviously, this came out in the survey results and the prioritization, but just making sure that the recreation trail component that is in the bike ped trail plan is aligned. And those four specific projects, the Linden Road Trailhead, paving of Southport Setback Levee, the Clarksburg Ranch, as well as the Main Drain Canal, and also then opportunities to create internal loop trails within parks that maybe don't necessarily have that. I've said this before, we always think about trails in these long linear systems that cost a lot of money. Sometimes people just want to go out and walk in their own neighborhood park, and you need a safe, ADA accessible place to do that. That opportunity exists in a few parks within your system to be able to enhance that opportunity and partially meet that need for not just trails, but also health, fitness, and wellness. So funding strategies for capital improvement plan. This is obviously a key component in an emerging issue. Before we jump into that, I want to make sure that this goes all the way back to the very first presentation we made, just to refresh your memory that we are going to create a capital improvement plan that is in 3 buckets. That first bucket is the sustainable bucket. It is strictly about the life cycle replacement of assets within your existing system. So that could be playgrounds, that could be picnic tables, that could be benches, that could be parking lot paving. Life cycle replacement never stops. And when you do put a halt to that, your operations and maintenance dollars begin to be used inefficiently because you're spending a lot of time and energy and money just repairing something that should be replaced. The second bucket is that expanded services bucket. Just to keep that short and sweet, adding internal loop trails to existing park systems is an example of a project that would fall in that second bucket. The third bucket is that bigger bucket. That's the visionary bucket. Part of why what falls in there is land acquisition, major park development, major overhaul of some specific parks. But in your case, it's really going to be about developing the undeveloped park acreage that you have. Part of why we wanted to break this out is, number one, I think it makes it easier for people to recognize the difference between in the projects, but also the fact that there are specific funding strategies that align with some of these buckets more so than other funding strategies. So the funding strategies that we are considering, we're trying to identify every last potential funding strategy. We're also trying to understand what the geographical restrictions are of those funding strategies. And then also, how do we allocate the dollars associated with each of these funding strategies to each project, to each bucket, and then to each project. So you can see there's probably in the neighborhood of about 12 or 13 different funding strategies that we've identified that are internal to the city of West Sacramento and/or that the city of West Sacramento is potentially eligible for. So one of the things that council asked us to do, and it's the first time we've actually ever done this from a pros consulting perspective, and I think it's a very valuable tool, is to recognize, to almost map, not to almost, but to map where the funding strategies, where the monies for some of the funding strategies are captured from, and then also then potentially where they could be spent. So community facilities districts are simply enhancement dollars to help further enhance parks, to build parks, and in some cases, to operate and maintain parks. The numeric, the one on the left, is all of the community facilities districts where money can be received and spent to capitally invest in the parks, but only in those areas. So only the parks that fall within those yellow areas are eligible for that funding. The map to the right are some of the community facilities districts in which some of the dollars captured in those areas can also then be used to operate and maintain those parks. That is pretty self-explanatory, but the big takeaway is that only the parks that fall within those community facilities districts are actually eligible for the community facility district funding. Bridge District and Pioneer Bluffs, these are very specific funding strategies that can further enhance park development in those areas. This is really tied to that emerging issue of economic development through park development and vice versa. As you can see, we've identified several parks and several opportunities within those, but again, only the parks that fall within those geographical areas are eligible for this specific special financing areas, the Bridge District and Pioneer Bluffs don't lock. Liberty and River Park housing developments make sense. These are typically either tied to development agreements and/or tied to park impact fees. I will say that Liberty is still working through its development agreement, so there has not necessarily been the plane landed on that the park impact fees collected through the Liberty housing development can only be used within that specific area. River Park has kind of landed the plane on its development agreement and is really going to, the funds either through in-kind contributions, capital improvement fees, or park impact fees and/or credits back will primarily be used to fund the parks that have been identified for that housing development. Yarborough Housing Development, same deal, still kind of working through that development agreement. That is looking to primarily fund the parks in that specific housing area. And then the EIFD is a new funding strategy that the city's kind of adopted over the last year or so through state. The state basically allowed cities to move forward with this. This is a funding strategy that identifies where the funds can be collected, but can be spent throughout the entire city. It is one of those funding sources that is new to the city, and I'll talk a little bit more about that in terms of the policy around that. But really, it's about enhancing economic development in the community, and parks, as we have said, play a major part in that. And then there are a bunch of citywide funding strategies. I mentioned the EIFD already, but general fund, Measure E, Measure K, Measure N, possible. Depends on what you all do in a few weeks at the during the elections. But if all of these funds can be basically used throughout the entire community, and that is part and parcel, the challenge with creating a capital improvement plan is the prioritization and the allocation of these resources. The cap trade disadvantaged community map, this really is an opportunity for the city to apply for grants. This is a map that is still kind of in process, but it basically limits the opportunities for park improvements to a specific area of the community. Primarily, you see those areas that are in red are really the ones that you start to look at as if there are parks within those areas and we identify projects for those parks within those areas, they become grant eligible. So another big part of this is the park impact fee analysis. So what we are trying to do is understand what our total capital improvement plan is going to be. And then we're trying to identify all the other potential funding sources that can potentially fund that CIP and understand then what is left that around which to do a park impact fee analysis. I will say that based on the demographic information that we have gleaned, there's about, over the next 10 years, about 2,511 new households projected in West Sacramento. What we have to do is identify how many of those households are already tied to the Bridge District Special Financing District. How many of them are already accounted for in the development agreements that you're tied to based on when those development agreements were adopted and accepted by City Council to determine the number of households that are left. The challenge with that is that what we're trying to do is not to put West Sacramento in an unfavorable position with the development community by putting too much burden of what's left over through on the park impact fee analysis. You're already at a point right now where your park impact fee in the region is the highest or one of the highest. We don't want to continue to move the dial and burden that, use that funding source as a way to improve your park system, but at the same time dissuade development in the community. So it's somewhat of a balancing act. This is the approach that we're taking right now. This might change once we're able to identify what the dollar amounts are from all those other funding sources and how we allocate them across the different projects. So wanted to walk through the policy issues around the funding sources that we've talked about. These are current, the first slide is really about current funding policies in place. Number one, utilization of Measure K for Recreation Center debt service. That has been a shift that Council has adopted over the last year. Previously, it was park impact fees that was covering that debt service. And then also CIP projects that primarily benefit children, such as shade structures over playgrounds. The utilization of CFD, the Community Facility District funds, for park improvements and operations and maintenance costs where applicable. One of the shifts with this Community Facility District funding is to actually use it in parks. A lot of the use of community facility districts has really been around landscape and lighting improvements in medians and right-of-ways. So we want to make sure that we continue to recognize that within the language of those community facility district agreements, that the opportunity exists for those funds to be used in parks and not just in ways to beautify the communities. The utilization of Measure E funds for trail development and maintenance, and then also the continued engagement of with the school district regarding future park development. We're using Westmore Oaks and charter schools as a starting point, but there is potentially other park development opportunities for future school sites in West Sacramento. So some of the emerging policy issue questions that make this process a little less straightforward. The first is the utilization of the EIFD for park and recreation improvements. Currently, policy does not yet exist as to how these funds will be specifically allocated. That is in process. So what we are trying to do is get an understanding in about a month or so from City Council, but we would love to have your weigh in on this as to if there's a percentage or if there's a dollar amount of all of those EIFD funds collected, how much of those should be shifted or at least allocated for park and recreation improvements in West Sacramento. The utilization of transportation impact fees, otherwise known as TIF, funding for all trail development, including recreational trails. So in many cases, the TIF is geared towards bike ped, multimodal, but we want to make sure that the recreation trail component is also potentially a part of that. Right now, policy is being developed, so the TIF is being updated, and we want to ensure that there is an opportunity for some of those dollars to be utilized on recreation trails and not necessarily just on-street improvements and sidewalks and so on and so forth. And then also the direction on how the groupie settlement funds should be utilized. There's about $2 million that is just sitting there. And so what we want to receive from City Council is some direction in terms of how those funds can and should be utilized to implement the CIP that's coming forth in your Park and Open Space Master Plan. Policy issues, some other ones, special district funding. We certainly want to make sure that as that money is collected, that it's monitored so that there is funding available for the parks that are actually planned in those specific areas. Ensuring the ability to leverage grant dollars, and just listed a few of those, Prop 68, active transportation and environmental funding. And then, of course, there's the general fund. We want to make sure that there is opportunities to utilize general funds to support park development, not necessarily just the capital investment, but also for, as I've said, every capital investment requires an O&M contribution, because otherwise, why build it if you can't operate it and maintain it? And what's the primary source of operations and maintenance dollars for all city infrastructure? It's primarily the general fund, usually outside of utilities. So our next steps, finalize the capital improvement fund, finalize the funding strategies, presentation to City Council November 7th. See, finalize a lot up there, which is good. Finalize Recreation Center business plan, finalize the operational and staffing assessment, and then the park impact fee update. That's all I got. Questions, concerns, comments, suggestions, direction? I'm going to put this one back up here if I can. Maybe I got locked out. I'm going to put this one back up there.
So I think we have two members of the public that requested to speak. We're going to have them come up, and then we'll have you come back up and answer some questions.
Perfect.
Is that fine? Eeny, meeny, miny, mo. Pat Flint? You're going to pass. You too. Danny Langford also passes. So come on back up. Put that on the record. Put that on record. Let's start down here on the end with Dan, and we'll kind of work our way this way and try to get all your questions at once so we can get them all on here.
You made a comment about River Park. Is
River
this
Park development, correct.
Okay, is that just a development that's starting up? Or
Yes.
going to be started?
Correct. It's anticipated to start within the, I don't know a specific date, but it will start and have new homes.
But is that what you guys are
within-
going to call it?
I'm sorry?
Is that what you're going to call it, River Park?
That's what it is called, correct.
Because my problem is sometimes the River Park area that I know is sitting in Sacramento, okay? And I noticed in a couple other spots, they kind of doubled up things, and so if you're actually looking for a place to go and you get to the wrong spot because you're thinking of the wrong River Park, that kind of bothers me as far as just the naming.
Yeah, it's the name of a subdivision, correct.
I know, but like I said, the one I know is sitting out there near Discovery Park, it's called River Park.
Right.
That's been there for years. But other than that, I was looking, well, like, we've been utilizing the schools for the parks too, but the one drawback I noticed in some of the schools now that they've been, for example, if you go to the old high school and you go to put your tennis courts in there, they might not be open to the public all the time.
Correct.
And that seemed like, and sometimes it'd be nice that they're actually, I know they go to other places and you have these places that are opened up all the time because the schools are getting to the point where they have them locked down or so you can't utilize them as much. Elkhorn is a prime example where that little park there is not utilized so much during some school times. So my suggestion was that sometimes on some of the places when we redo parks or upgrade them, maybe some areas that we could actually have it open to the public more so than just on a limited basis.
Duly noted. I think that is something that was trying to be overcome with Elkhorn with the redevelopment of that. And I think that it's all, not to make it sound so easy, it's all in the planning and the access points and, how you have opportunities to separate school use from public use. So, yes, but Elkhorn's a really good
Because I
example.
know, like tennis courts, we had, the high school has the tennis courts. You had the old high school that has some tennis courts. Whether they're being used or not, I think not right now. But you also did have, there was a apartment complex out there off of Linden Road that at one time we could utilize their tennis courts. That'd be the only one that at that time could have been actually opened up,
Correct.
okay?
Yeah, I think
We
you
have
make a-
one at the old riverbank, but they don't want to utilize that for that.
Yeah, I think you make a
So
good point about some of the access to parks that we have, is
Yeah,
that
that's-
because we
that's-
have the schools, and that's what we were talking about, being able to have a good partnership with those places. So with, like, if you have private-owned tennis courts, being able to access those, or school-owned facilities, if they let us use that, is having a good relationship where we didn't have a good relationship with the school maybe 10, 20 years ago. That's getting better and better, that we're able to have that communication, that we're able to then use those things. So it's not as simple as saying, yeah, it would be great that we could use that park. That's great. We don't control that park. That's the hard part, I think. I think
Well, I know,
that
but
you're
then
getting
the
to,
other
yeah.
thing, I think like for the schools, you're trying to get 30-year leases rather than the old 2025. So, which goes to the comment you made earlier about maybe find out what they're going to do with that school.
Correct.
So, but I think sometimes we end up building some stuff and sometimes for example, we got a big old ball diamond out there at what I call the water park one, and it seems like it can't be used anymore. So, maybe we could figure out how to reuse it so that get it back, so it's actually used as within our park frame, so forth.
Okay.
Okay?
Thank
My
you.
only comments.
Hi. Thanks for your presentation. I always learn so much when you're up there, so I appreciate it. You mentioned EIFT, so that was exciting what you mentioned, that it's something relatively new to West Sacramento, but other cities have utilized it. And then you asked for feedback about allocation of funds for parks. I'm curious about other, maybe like relatively similar sized cities to West Sac and if you have the information off the top of your head, what they do.
Yeah, I think that, every EIFD funding strategy provides different opportunities for the community that is collecting it. I think West Sacramento is in the process of recognizing that it was a funding strategy, is a funding strategy that has an opportunity to enhance the community, but in terms of the specificity to what those enhancements actually mean is what is still kind of being worked out. I do not have a specific answer to your question, but maybe Tracy does.
Well, the short answer is I don't have an answer, but the reason being is that it's very new. And as Michael and I have been going through this process with our other Parks and Rec staff and other city departments, we are working very closely with Economic Development and Public Works as both of those departments work to develop either updated transportation impact fee policy, but also with Economic Development as they're working through the EIFD policy right now on how we start to think about prioritizing the funding. It's very, very new, and it's not only new for our city, but for the few other cities that are exploring or looking into that source of funding. It's still too new to have, a lot of other existing examples to point to.
The EIFD it's the Enhanced Infrastructure Financing Districts. It's basically the successors to redevelopment. They've been in somewhat of a limbo since redevelopment was done away with. This was kind of the way that the state started bringing it back, redevelopment back, and put a lot of strictures on how those monies could be spent to try to address some of the wasteful complaints that they had before. West Sacramento is actually the first city in the state of California to successfully set up an EIFD, and that has a lot to do with the current city manager, who was the former head of the economic department. Aaron, he's extremely smart in this stuff. But so we're actually kind of setting policy or helping to get policy set in West Sacramento with the state. The city of West Sacramento actually identified an issue with the EIFDs in the very first year that they were rolled out, and that they would pay for building something, but then you could not use any of those monies for upkeep. And the city of West Sacramento actually had to go to the state capitol this past year and had a bill signed by the governor that changed that a little bit. That was just signed a week ago. So I was kind of surprised when you were asking us for our opinions on how to spend EIFD dollars, because I think there's a lot of people who know a lot about them that have not a lot of clue at the moment as to how to make that happen. But it's kind of exciting to see West Sacramento is really on the forefront of this and helping to set state policy. And the big hope is that with the new governor, so the joke is right now with the current governor, you can't even say the word redevelopment. That's why they came up with a new term for it. But that when the new governor comes in, the last piece that really needs to happen with EIFDs is funding to start flowing from the state. And that's what everyone's waiting for under the new governor. So it was a very complicated question you gave to a bunch of volunteers.
Do you support the utilization of EIFD funds for park improvements? Enhanced improvements in parks in West Sacramento. Maybe that's a better way to say it.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Matt. Wow, that was quite informative.
Helps to have a group of somewhat experts in certain fields. You have something?
Yeah, can you go back to the trails slide? I guess I'm just trying to have a better understanding of where you talk about trying to put a trail in a loop.
Trails.
I can try to explain that.
I know if I, roll this too fast, I'll end up at the beginning, so bear with me. There. See, I told you I'd pass it. There we go.
Yeah, so the creation of internal loop trails within existing parks, do we have an example of that already?
You know,
Westfield?
yeah, the Westfield's one. I think
Summerfield?
Summerfield is another one.
And maybe a need for one would be like Bright Park?
Bright Park would have opportunities. It just depends on how the master plan gets internal. I would say it should, specifically because it's an athletic field complex. And sometimes there's downtime, and people want to use that. You know, I think sometimes when you think of athletic fields, you always think of games. But sometimes there's just a lot of practices going on, and moms and dads want to maybe not just sit and watch practice. So that internal loop trail actually becomes advantageous as well.
Okay, I was just making sure that I had the proper understanding of it. I mean, I go to Summerfield Park and I go with my stroller and my dogs and I walk around the park.
Right,
And
that's it.
so I tend to do that pretty often, but then I go and I visit my mom, and she lives near Bright Park. And I'm like, oh, well, I can't really take the stroller around the park.
Right,
It's a little
exactly.
bit hard, but then I also think about perhaps some sort of like little trail pathway to get from the actual play structure to maybe where the soccer fields are. I guess.
And, yeah, and sometimes when we think about internal loop trails, we only think about the loop, but there's always the spokes to it that get you to a specific place or a place-making location within the park. So, yes, I think that, it's not just a health and wellness and fitness component, but it's an ADA accessibility component that I think sometimes gets overlooked in park design.
And so have there been any parks identified as trying to provide this loop trail?
Yeah, I don't have them off the top of my head. I know that we have identified a number of them in that expanded services bucket, but Westmore was,
An old Westmore.
right, exactly.
Charter school, whatever they call it.
Charter school. Those are, when we talked about developing those site-specific master plans, that was a major component of which, how do we make sure that that's a part of the plan? So I think as you move forward with, and there will be a couple of parks that we recommend new site-specific master plans for, that's a major component of it, starting point for it.
Thank you.
I could just
Sure.
If I could say, you're going to hear an item next with the redevelopment of Memorial Park will have the ability then for people to traverse through there and have like a walking trail as well, based on the new design. So just thought I'd throw that in there.
Matt? Got anything? No.
No, I think the plan looks great. I mean, the funding on this is always hard. Local government financing is extremely complicated.
It is.
Especially these days where the landscape is constantly shifting and funds get pulled and bonds get passed. And so I really appreciate what you do and what all the staff does, seeing a lot of times where the funding comes from these projects is just crazy. Everyone thinks it just comes out of the general fund, and it doesn't.
Right.
You know that half of our budget in the city comes from 100 little buckets here and there.
Correct.
So having folks that can navigate us through that at the staff level and with consultants is really appreciated. And I hope we keep figuring out how to do the EIFD stuff, because I do think that that's going to be a great source of funding for a city like West Sac to figure out how to make that work to our advantage.
Yeah, I think the one thing that having a diversified funding portfolio does for you is it does potentially give you that opportunity to combine this, that, and the other funding sources into a grant match. As opposed to a lot of communities just look to the general fund for that handout, and it makes it extremely difficult and makes your grant application extremely difficult to become successful. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Sasha? Nothing. I made a couple notes, was the undeveloped acreage, you covered that, sorry. Continue to talk with the school district, we kind of covered that with Dan's comments, but that's something that's going to be big. I know some of the conversations I've had with some of the school board, sitting school board, and some of the school board candidates about how that's going to work going forward. I still think that's a great opportunity to use that land, and like you said, it's land that's there that's not being used. And I went by the Washington Middle High School charter school site, and somebody had told me it's all just weeds, and I'm like, no, it's not all weeds, it's a playground. And like the last time I went over there, it was a playground, but now it's 10 years later. I hadn't been there, I hadn't seen it. So took a look at that. I think it's important to continue to develop that relationship with the school district. I was really impressed to see that map with the little facility districts and the funding strategies, because that's something that's constantly talked about in the community of like, well, how come I can't get a park here? Don't we have money for this park here? It's like, we have money for that park there, how come we don't have it here? So outlining where that money comes from and being able to visualize it and talk it down to the neighborhood, down to the street level, to say, yeah, there is funding for this park from this facility district or this cap and trade disadvantaged parks. We're not going to get a cap and trade disadvantaged park at, Bridgeway Lakes. That's not part of it, but we could use that money to put that park at Westfield or in Bright. Those are the things that using that map. So having all that information out there is great. I think one of the strategies that we should really employ from on a public relations standpoint is when we're doing something, is tell people how we got the money for this. I know we're doing that, and doing it more, doing it better, to be able to say, yeah, this park was paid for from Community Facility District. That money can only be spent here, and we got a grant match because we did this. And being able to lay that out, and that'll really make it clear for everybody. So this is why this project was able to happen, and it wouldn't have happened if we didn't do this, this, and that. If it didn't, we got a grant to do this because we had public art at the park. Talking about that and connecting those things together for people so that they really realize that these things are all connected, and it is a million tiny little buckets of money. It's not just your taxpayer dollar.
Yeah, taking the your taxpayer dollars hard at work message and drilling it down a little bit further. Great idea.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of my takeaway looking at that map and seeing that. I was interested to hear that we already have, come on, Paul. We already have one of the highest park impact fees in the region. I didn't know that, so it's good to hear.
Upwards of 15 to 16,000.
I think what you said, if we might not want to push that, and the flip side is we might want to push that. If we're such a desirable location for developers to to work is figure out that balance. Like I said, you have to have that balance of being attractive to developers and also getting the most out of them. So it's negotiating.
Right, exactly. I think the one thing that is really critically important is to recognize that if you do realize 2,511 houses in the next 10 years. Not all 2,511 of those houses are going to be paying into a park impact fee. Several of, I would probably say maybe a fourth of that might just be in the Bridge District alone that has its own special financing district. And so you kind of have to take that right off the top and start to understand really your park impact fee, you're not a high-growth community, and so your park impact fee is not going to be a high source of revenue. And so if it's not going to be a huge high source of revenue, why are you putting yourself in a position of being the highest in the region? Just to get an extra couple $100,000? I mean, it's probably not the
One more
most
water fountain.
strategic way to go.
Any other questions? All right, thanks for your time.
Thank you. See you, folks.
All right, back to the agenda. Regular agenda, item number 6, consideration of an update for the Memorial Park ADA upgrades project. Jeremy.
All right. Good evening, Commissioners. The item before you tonight is an update on the Memorial Park ADA upgrade project. Following the August 7th Commission meeting, there was a lot of comments and concerns during that meeting regarding primarily the trees and retaining the canopy at the park. So in the past few weeks, we've gone back, we've worked with our consultant, with our arborist, and what we're presenting tonight is kind of the final plan of what we can do with that canopy. We were able to go back and identify about at least 5 or 6 additional trees that we could keep. The other ones, there's too much of a conflict with the improvements, or they're going to affect the improvements really quickly if we build over them. Tree roots and other things are going to come right back. So it's not great for our investment to have to go back and fix things. Before I move on to the exhibit, I did just want to touch on some of what we're also recommending is kind of an expanded scope in regards to some of the additional improvements that came from comments during our open house and other submissions. So some of those other items listed, we're recommending to keep the sunken dugouts. We've had additional estimates come in, the construction estimates. We're looking towards using ADA lifts rather than taking up a good chunk of the infield with the ramps and things that we discussed previously. So we're looking towards doing those. We're also looking at we're trying to take a well-rounded approach to those, the additional input and the requests from the public. So we're trying to add some other amenities in regards to the group picnic area, the combined, a bigger combined restroom and concession facility. And with those, we also will, when we do go to council, we'll be requesting the additional funding for those. But we feel like it's worth the money. There's cost savings in doing it now rather than pushing it out. So that's what we're going to recommend as we move forward. And then in regards to the exhibit and the trees, since that was the primary concern, as you look through this exhibit, any of the darker green trees are the proposed new trees, and then some of the smaller pinkish red ones. But any of those other ones that are marked Y, or you see kind of an outline, those are the trees that we're proposing to keep. One example of one that we were able to keep is up at the corner of Delaware and Regent. kind of that, there's one Y there, but there's a group of trees, and we were able to actually keep, I think, two of them there, just by changing moving the sidewalk a little bit, changing the path. Also, on the other corner, Y, adjacent to that parking lot, we went back out, remeasured, and the ADA parking, proposed ADA parking, should fit by keeping that tree, just trimming it up. Some other ones that were really of concern were the big redwoods at the north of the minor league field. We went back, went through the arborist report, went through the recommendations. There is a lot of maintenance. The biggest concern on that was safety. We wanted to make sure they're going to be healthy and we're going to be able to retain them. They are large, so we don't want them breaking off, but they were comfortable with their recommendations of the trimming and bracing or guide wiring, and so that's, moving forward, that's what we're recommending. And I think with that, if you have any other questions.
We've got 3 members of the community. Pat and Danny already passed. No, I'm just kidding. You guys coming up for this one, I'll start with Danny Langford, and then we'll bring you back up here. Okay, perfect. You guys decide among yourselves. Pat Flint.
I just want to thank the commission up here, Cindy Tuttle, and the West Sacramento Little League for making our dreams come true. You did an awesome job working together, and I really appreciate that. Sorry to hear we're only going to keep 5 or 6 trees, but the plan looks great, and I'm not sure exactly what we're getting in what phases because I didn't have a chance to review this before I came tonight, but I did want to say thank you to everybody. And I'm not going to take my 3 minutes tonight, and I don't always speak negatively. I want you to know I do appreciate each and every one of you that worked on this. I want to thank Cindy Tuttle for your voice. It's beautiful. It's the first time I heard you is when I went to the concert in the park. Great saxophone player sitting up here. Awesome group, and it was an awesome night, so thank you.
Thanks, Pat. Danny? You summed it up, okay. I was looking at that, wanted to ask you here, I'm looking at the plan, and Pat mentioned 6 trees. Looks like I counted 16 trees that were remaining, or is it 6?
Yeah, we were able to save 5 or 6 additional trees.
Oh, 5 or 6 additional trees.
Since last time, yeah.
Count 11.
I counted 16 right now, real quick, but.
Yeah, it's approximately 16.
16, yeah.
I do have a specific question, though, on some of the trees. It is, so, all right, I'm going to ask about a specific tree.
Okay.
Which you do have outlined here. It's the one at Delaware and Regent, and that's, the neighbor right there is very concerned about that tree. And to tell you the truth, that's one of my favorite trees in West Sac, because it's like a natural mulberry that has never been nubbed. It is outlined here, and it is adjacent to a Y. Is that one of the trees that has been identified as being able to be saved?
Yes, it is. That
That's
group of
surprising.
3, yeah, they put the 1 Y there, but it is the group. They didn't want to make it confusing with the dugouts and
That's actually really good news. I think that's going to make that neighbor especially happy. That helps block some of the baseballs from their house. But it's also just a grand mulberry. So that's really good news. And I really appreciate you guys took a hard look at this. I think that was part of the discussion we had last time was go back and see what trees we can actually save. And I mean, this is a lot of them. I can understand some of these trees here along the road, but the fact that so many of those old trees are retained in this plan is appreciated.
Great, thank you.
We did have one member of the public to speak. I did want to get the answer to that trees thing really quick so we could talk about that, but Dave Jantz from the Little League is here.
Okay. The one other question I think I heard was in regards to the phasing. We are proposing to do this in one phase, so thank you.
So there's a button on there, you can raise the whole thing up and down. Or that'll work too.
You hear me, right?
Yeah.
I wanted to comment on a little bit beyond the trees, just from the Little League standpoint, from what you see on the master plan as it gets finalized. But I want to thank you for having me up here, and I just wanted to make a comment, along with the other ones, about city staff and how wonderful they've been throughout this process. We've come a long way since January, and the potential closure or movement of Little League out of this longstanding home field for us. But they've been extremely responsive to our concerns, and we've since created a cohesive and productive relationship that we hope will last a very long time and establish a foundation for the future. So Cindy and Jeremy and everybody have been really great throughout this process, so I just wanted to recognize them. But regarding the master plan, as you can see, this plan here keeps the Memorial Park trademark sunken dugouts, which is extremely popular with local players and visiting players alike. But now these big league dugouts, so to speak, are going to be accessible to all children in our community and the surrounding areas, which I think is sometimes overlooked, and that's a huge accomplishment that it's now going to be accessible to them. The ability to work together with the city on this and maintain what is special to our home field, but also enhance its accessibility to more children in our area should speak volumes about the leadership, innovation, and commitment of both the city and the league to this project. It sets a standard for collaborative problem solving between organizations and city staff, and it should make everybody involved in the completion of this project very, very proud, I think personally. The other thing that we have here is we're able to keep all four of these fields, one of them which is the T-ball field, which stands right there on Regent Street, and that's kind of our introduction to baseball, so we really appreciate that this is part of the plan as well. As regarding the main building, which we'll refer to, I think it's K, is that right? I can't tell from here. B, excuse me. That also is a huge accomplishment as well, because now we went from having to choose, or at least the community and the league having to choose between the sunken dugouts and the building, or the building. It's now presented in one plan, which I think also should be recognized as well. So we don't have to make that hard choice anymore. That's really important to recognize. It also combines storage, so there's a large metal box that we keep a lot of our equipment in right now, a Connex box. So this building here actually includes a space for us to store that, and we can get rid of that metal box now, which is kind of an eyesore in this park. We're just requesting that it's be large enough so we can store all of our maintenance equipment that we use for the fields. The league does a lot of work to maintain the fields at Memorial Park, which in turn saves money, that can be spent by the Parks Department somewhere else. The city can spend that money elsewhere because we're maintaining it. So I don't know what the exact dimensions are, but if it could be big enough to store what's currently in there, that would be wonderful. And then the orientation of it, I think we spoke about in some other meetings. The parents are volunteers who like to watch their kids play, while they're working in the main building, the snack bar or snack shack, and we would like to maybe see some large windows. We talked about maybe doing like one side on the Delaware side, maybe be like an order here type, so you can see the majors field, and then maybe on the other side, facing the minor league field could be a pickup window, so we can kind of have some flow. People aren't congregating there and so forth. That would be nice as well. We have some bleachers there that were donated to the league to be used at the park there. We would like to either have those be reused at Memorial if possible, and if not, that they be moved to the Alice Norman baseball field so that they just don't get destroyed or getting rid of. And then the scorekeeper booths, there's maybe some more discussions we could have on how that's exactly going to look. We had some discussions internally about it, but it could be very simple, could be very simplified, just a bench or whatnot, but we'd like to see a few more things discussed about the scorekeeper's booth. And next to that right now resides some field maintenance or some field equipment for chalking lines, bases, things like that. And I don't see that on the plan here. So I'm hoping that we can maybe include some sort of storage at each field so that the parents can set the field up for the players. It's currently at Memorial now, but I don't believe it's on the master plan. And then finally, I just wanted to notify the commission that we're launching kind of a Brickyard fundraiser where we're going to be trying to raise as much money as we can to enhance the park in many ways that we can. The building, the snack building is just going to be kind of a shell, so we're going to need to put sinks and tables and things in that so that we can serve people who attend the games. We're going to be raising money for that, and also to help do our part to, fund any shortfalls or budget overages that may occur in the project. We want to do our part to fund as much as we can as well. I think that's important too. It's been really well received, and I think it's going to be a huge success. So I know I'm taking up a lot more of the time than I have, but I just wanted to let everyone know that we're really excited about this plan and that we're very grateful for everything that the city's put together so far. So thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
And then anybody has any questions for the league?
Does anybody have any questions for the league?
Yeah, can you share with us once you find out about the fundraising event?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, we plan to promote it heavily. And it's been extremely popular as far as ideas. We've attended a few events. We were at an OLG event last week, and everybody who's come by to check it out seems to be very excited about the opportunity to have kind of a family name or somebody in their family who's played at Memorial, put up on this main building here. And we're working now with the city to establish exactly what that's going to be, how much it's going to cost, how it will be installed, what it'll look like, and all the details. So right now, we're collecting interest and kind of first come, get the nice spots on the snack shack. And then as that details come out, we'll email and contact people, definitely. Any other questions for the league or?
Any questions for the league over here? No, we're good. Thanks, Dave.
All right, thanks again, appreciate it.
Hey, Jeremy, come back up. Any other questions for the city? Sherman?
I just have a quick question. Who's our new arborist?
I'm sorry?
We have an arborist, right? Dina retired, that's what I've heard, but who's the new person? I don't know their name.
So that would be
Chris.
Chris Sarowski.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
Tree Davis.
I didn't realize you were the arborist, so thank you.
I'm the tree administrator. So when he talked about the arborist, that was a consultant arborist that's working on the project
I see.
that identified the trees in poor health and how to strengthen trees in poor health and save the ones that were
Okay,
in
but you're the
decline.
tree guy, so,
Yeah.
thank you.
Thanks.
I guess this is a non-related question. The playground shade, this Memorial Park will be one of the, is still part of the city's plan to provide shaded over the playgrounds, right? Will that be folded into this timeline, or is it after? How's it going to work?
No, that's a very good question. In the original CIP that went to council, the shade for Memorial Park was scheduled in the 2020 year. As part of the action that we'll be taking to council on the 17th of October, we will request that the Memorial Park shade structure be moved into the 2019 fiscal year so that it can be put in as part of this project. So it will be part of the action that council takes or will consider, on the 17th so that it can all be done together. And that funding is completely separate from the funding for this particular project.
I think that's important to point out too, is that somebody else look at this drawing and say, there's no shade structure. And then knowing that this drawing is one person's project, and then that's another project, but they're going to get folded in.
Correct.
You had a question?
So I was looking at the shade tree where the parking is on I believe. And did you mention that would need to be cut down a little bit or trimmed off for the parking space?
Just trimmed up, the lower limbs will have to be trimmed up. We're looking at, and we're putting line item in to really just go through and trim up and clean up all the existing trees. There's a similar situation, just if you traveling to the west on that pathway, some of those trees kind of will encroach on that new sidewalk area as well, so.
And has it already been decided that there will be 4 parking spots available there?
Yes, that's all we're going to be able to fit, and per the ADA requirements, I believe it's only 2, but we're trying to maximize the space and get a couple more back in there as well.
Is there consideration to make all 4 ADA accessible? Or to make all 4 of them wheelchair?
Yes,
There's a difference between ADA accessible and van accessible. So
yeah,
there's-
yeah. So the hatched area is more of the bigger one is the.
We'll have 2 of them be van accessible and the other 2 still
Right.
ADA accessible.
Normal
Yeah.
size part.
Normal size.
Yeah.
Okay,
yes.
so all 4 will be.
I think
As far as I know, we have the 2 required. Once we get the complete final plan and measure in the field, we're pretty sure we'll get at least the 3
Okay.
fully accessible.
one of the things that makes a parking spot ADA accessible is the curbing around it and that kind of stuff. So by having these in the position that they are, they're technically all 4 accessible with the way the curbing is, but the 2 van accessible spots, really 1 van accessible spot's required. So looking at it that way.
I just think that that's an important consideration. I'm really glad that you guys are accommodating that in here.
Thank you.
On the parking, do you know if one of these has to be a charging station under state law?
Not at that time. If we had them, if we had that facility there, it would have to be, yes. But it's not required to have a charging station, but if we added it like we added here at City Hall, then they would indeed need to be accessible, yeah.
Sasha, anything? Danny?
I just again want to echo what Commissioner Hargrove said earlier and commend everybody for their good work and everybody getting together and really making this happen for not just for the Little League, but for the community. Your office, Cindy's office, and my fellow commissioners here. I mean, from what this was just a few months ago to what this is now, and seeing smiling faces that just walked out, that's wonderful. So I just want to commend you and thank you.
All right, thank you.
Commissioner Mond?
I wanted to find out if this master plan was available somewhere publicly. I know, I'm sure it'll get up online somewhere, but physically available for people to look at.
We haven't posted this one, but I think we
Yes,
took.
it is.
Is this?
It is publicly available. You can just go to the agenda for this meeting and click on it, and the full report plus your attachment that has the full-scale schematic is available online.
And
Well, what I meant was, I know it's probably online, but at somewhere, because one of the complaints, and this is piggybacking off of Greg's comment about just communicating people who have been very involved with this project, older folks in this town, can they see it at the library or at the community center? Can it be tacked somewhere? That's what I was thinking.
Anyone can come into City Hall and request to look at any agenda item. So if somebody came to City Hall and said, hey, I'd like to see the schematic for Memorial Park, we're more than happy to provide that to them.
Okay.
Yeah, and as we move forward, there'll be opportunities. We were even discussing that today. As we revamp like our Public Works site, we'll start moving it. As we move into construction, there'll be progress updates, and we can even put plans and specs in there so people can see them.
Jeremy, on the timing, so it's the 2019 season ends, you break ground the next day?
We do.
And then you have 9 months to make it happen?
Yep, and that's.
In the winter.
That will be the schedule.
And we think it's doable?
Yeah, it's not a lot of deep, there's not a ton of underground and phasing, it's really a lot of grading work. There will be some coordination with the Public Works project that's going in, with the little bit of utility work that's going in. So we will have that, but overall, it's a lot of grading. The dugouts are going to be probably the biggest chunk of the work, but it should be doable, and that's what we'll look to a contractor to present that phasing and meet that timetable as we move forward.
Anything else? All right, thanks, Jeremy.
All right, thank you.
Dun, dun, dun.
Chair Price, I would look for a motion on this item as stated in the recommended action for council, please.
Sorry, I didn't see that. My bad.
I'll make a motion. to move.
Second.
Give it to Daniel. Give it to Daniel.
So we have a motion to approve the plan as drawn and commented from Commissioner Sandoval, seconded by Commissioner Clayton. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Hearing none, that motion goes. Sorry, I missed that. Oh, recommend to City Council that they approve the preferred options. Okay, yeah, sorry. No. General Administration Function Part 2, Item 1A, Director's Report.
Thank you. Bear with me, I do have several items tonight. First and foremost, I want to introduce to you our new senior clerk, Miss Katie Dyke. Katie, if you can wave your hand. She will be our, well, Anna isn't leaving, but Anna, as you know, has just been temporarily sitting in because we lost Robin to Salt Lake City, as you may recall. But Katie's going to join us on Monday, and we were very pleased that she agreed to come tonight so she could check this all out. So welcome to Katie. Thank you. I want to remind the commission that we have scheduled a special meeting on October 16th. The primary purpose of that meeting is for review and comment and recommendation to City Council on the Sycamore Trail Phase 2 and 3 aesthetic treatments. I know some of you have questioned why we had to have a special meeting and why we just didn't have it at this meeting. It's so close. It's because the designs weren't completed yet, and we couldn't wait until our next meeting because we need to get it to council before certain timing. So it was a timing issue, really, with the project. So the only item on October 16th, this is a joint meeting with the Arts Commission, will again be the Sycamore Trail 2 and 3, Phase 2 and 3 aesthetic treatments for the bridge going over the freeway. I would like to ask Commissioner Hargrove if he could please give us the latest and greatest on a very fun event that's coming up this weekend that the city is co-sponsoring.
Sure, thank you very much. And this is a tale of when the city asks you to maybe volunteer for doing something. Be careful about raising your hand. But it was about 6 or 7 years ago, sitting in this room where the city was in the doldrums of deep budget cuts, but was also looking to put together something for the fall. Was looking for a big marquee type sporting event to do. There was a conversation here in this room about this. It preceded Cindy, and the city was looking to hire a consultant to come in and create a sporting event. And it ended up, I raised my hand and said, hey, I'd love to work with the city on putting something together for this crazy sport that is growing in California called cyclocross. And that's where this all started. We felt the first year, if we got 150 people to show up to this event, it would have been a huge success. The first year, we ended up with over 400. We also, in the beginning, said it would be really neat if we made this an actual professional sporting event. Nobody believed we would ever actually make that happen. Within 4 years, though, this became a UCI-sanctioned race. It's an international professional race. It's the same sanctioning body that does the Amgen race. We're a C2 UCI race now, and it's a 2-day event, and we're expecting a couple thousand friends and family to show up this weekend to West Sacramento. There's, aside from racing, a big piece of this event has always been to do other things aside from the bike racing. Not everyone wants to ride a bike or race or can. So we've always had community things there, like Bike Dog's always been a supporter. We have food trucks there. We have live music. Danny hasn't played yet, but maybe sometime. This year, we've expanded it, so we have live music both on Saturday and on Sunday. The event is free for anyone to come out and see the live music or see the racing. And then this year, because it wasn't complicated enough, and because Cindy stopped riding a bicycle, we've added a 5K this year. So on Saturday at 5:30 is the first ever West Sacramento urban trail run, and that is so West Sac that we're doing an urban trail run. We thought about it, and we thought about the waterfront and all the neat stuff we have going on there, and why have people run on the streets when we can have them run down the river? So the 5K is basically going to go from the Tower Bridge, underneath the I Street Bridge, past the Broderick Boat Ramp, to the Chart House, if any of you remember the Chart House, and then back from there. So that's this weekend at Riverwalk Park. It's a city event, and hopefully it's free. Oh, also, I want to make sure if anyone's watching at home, there's free vendor space there for any West Sacramento nonprofit. And we would really, really like nonprofits and to come out and vend at it. There's a lot of people that are coming through this event. And that free vendor area is being hosted by the Yolo County Children's Alliance. So thank you for the opportunity to give an update on that.
Thank you.
So I've raced in that every year.
I know, I was going to,
I'm the most out of shape out of all those years this year, so here we go. Anything else from the director's report? We talked about commission calendar.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I have a few more reports. I'm
perfect.
sorry. I want to just let you know that you will all be, if you haven't already, receiving a letter that you'll need to reapply for your commission appointments. And so you'll be receiving that letter, so don't be surprised if you get it. It just means you need to reapply if you wish to continue to serve on a commission here in the city. I want to invite you to a dog park event that we're having at Sam Combs Park. You should have received an invitation in your email, but in case you didn't get it, on Friday, October 12th, we're going to be working with Bear Crop Science on their second annual community event. You may recall their gracious donation of time and energy and product to Elkhorn Park last year. This year it is for Sam Combs Park for our four-legged furry friends. We're going to be doing some improvements to that park, and so come on out and join us on Friday, October 12th. I believe it is at 10 a.m. We'd love to have you come out and join us to work on that park. And then I would like to...
Cindy,
Sir?
do you know when the park will be reopened?
Well, it could be as early as, if everything goes well, it could be as early as the next day.
Okay.
October 13th. It's currently closed now to doing all this prep work, and then we're going to do the final push on Friday, the 12th. So if everything goes well, hopefully the next day. If not, it should be opened within the week after that.
Wonderful. Thank you.
And I would like to have Tracy, the commission had asked last meeting, I think it was Commissioner Clayton that asked for an update on the Southport setback levy recreation report implementation. And so Tracy's just going to give you a couple of minutes on that. And then I have one other item and then I'll be done.
Thank you. So last summer, it was almost a year ago, we presented the draft Southport Setback Levy Recreation Trail Report to this commission. And that report looked at analyzing the feasibility of integrating trail improvements into the levee project to make sure that it didn't compromise the integrity of the levee. It identified trail locations, connections from the levee trail to other existing or planned trails, and also located opportunities for trail amenities, including trailheads. That report was actually approved by City Council on September 20th. It's also subsequently been incorporated into the Bike Ped Trail Master Plan document that was recently approved by Council in July of this year. Right after the council approved the Southport Setback Levy Recreation Trail Report, like the next agenda item after, we submitted an application to state parks for their Habitat Conservation Fund program. We did bring that grant program application to this commission as well that looked at funding to support acquisition of property for a piece of property identified as a key trailhead location because it was a remnant parcel from the levee improvement project. It was centrally located along the 5.6 mile stretch to provide a good access point to and from the levee, and also a good location to provide support amenities like some shade, some seating, maybe some parking, and trash and recycling receptacles, and just information on the general maintenance activities going on the levee. We were notified in June that we actually received grant funding for the acquisition of that property. So we're in the process right now of trying to finalize a purchase agreement. And state parks encourage us to apply for the final round of the Habitat Conservation Fund grant program, our second application for the program. And so we did prepare an application pending City Council approval at their October 17th council meeting. We didn't have time to take it to this commission or prepare the information for the meeting this evening, but what we're asking for as part of that grant application is funding to actually construct the trailhead improvements. So we've tried to work really hard to start implementing components of that Southport setback levy trail report. Another item that I wanted to share with you is that the California River Parkways Grant Program in 2018 became available, a two-phase process. The first phase was invitation to submit concept proposals, and we did submit one a week ago for paving the entire length of the Southport setback levy trail. So we requested funding, no match required for paving of that trail. If our concept proposal is successful, by the end of October, we will be invited to submit a full application for that process. So we are taking great strides to try to implement components of that trail report, and are really excited about the opportunities that Prop 68 is already providing us. So I'm happy to answer any questions on that.
Thank you, I think
Okay.
we're good.
And my last item is, I think most of you know this, but for those of you that don't, is that I will be retiring at the end of this year, December 31st. Actually, December 28th will be my last official day at the city, but I'm very confident that our city manager, Erin Laurel, will select a great person to continue the great work that you are all doing. So that is it for my director's report.
I actually got notified by, via city attorney that item 1C should not be on our agenda for future item requests, that only the city manager or city council can put items on our agenda. We've sort of colloquially just talked about like, hey, these are things that we want to know about, but we were kind of directed not to do that anymore. So we're going to skip item 1C and move on to the adjournment. Do we have a motion to adjourn the meeting?
So moved.
So moved by Commissioner Hargrove,
Second.
second by Commissioner Ahmad. All in favor of adjourning the meeting, say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Hearing none, the motion carries. We're adjourned.